to our breaking news this morning. The Defence Secretary appears to have confirmed that the high-speed rail link between Birmingham and Manchester is going to be scrapped.
Grant Shapps said the Prime Minister will give more detail about how the money will be reinvested in his speech at the Tory party conference later today. And Grant Shapps joins us now. Mr Shapps, we just heard from Andy Burnham that actually, if what the Prime Minister is doing is deciding to reprioritise in order that the money which was to be for the Birmingham-Manchester line is instead going to be used for the east-west Northern Line, where actually the economic benefits are, that's something that he would support. And you'll have looked at the detail of this in your years as Transport Secretary. Is that the better decision? Is that what you would advise the Prime Minister to do? Is it what he's going to announce today? Will Andy Burnham be happy or disappointed?
Morning. First of all, look, I think we should wait to hear the Prime Minister's speech, obviously, but to let him set out the plan.
But you've seen the
detail. I would say in advance, what I would say in advance is that there's been a lot of speculation about this. The one thing I do know, because I know the figures very well, is that this is a tens of billions of pounds decision that before coronavirus and before we knew whether people would go back to work in the normal way that they did before, seemed very obvious, but subsequently is much less obvious. And what we have heard about is, scrapping that second part of HS2, although I should say HS2 trains would still run all the way. But we haven't heard about is how that money would be spent. I'm afraid we will have to wait for the speech to hear about that, but it could involve a lot of very important projects, which actually I think communities would like around the country.
You said in the past, HS2's business case has been founded on increasing capacity on our constrained rail network, improving connectivity and stimulating economic growth and regeneration. You also said we're determined to improve transport connections and level up communities across the country. This marks a landmark moment as we bring HS2 to Manchester and lay the foundations for Northern Powerhouse Rail. You also said investing in transport links is essential to levelling up access to opportunities across the country, ensuring our regions are better connected. Why have you changed your mind?
It's one word, coronavirus. If you look at the amount of people travelling on the West Coast Main Line, for example, now compared with before coronavirus, it's 69%. The full number of passengers hasn't come back again. But as I say, what you're somewhat hearing here is only half the story, because of course the money that would have been spent would still be available to be spent, including potentially on other projects. But I don't want to preempt the speech because you'll have to hear how the Prime Minister sets that out. What I can say is the principle of it is taking those difficult long-term decisions, sometimes not popular in the short term, but when we get those right, and this is something Rishi Sunak is very, very good at, looking at the detail, analysing it, carefully considering, and then making difficult decisions long-term and looking to a brighter future as a result. And I think that's what we're here about today in the tone of his speech as well.
Mr Shapps, you are a political strategist and have advised lots of people who've then become Prime Minister. You know how to run a good conference. To have a conference which is entirely overshadowed by days of speculation about HS2, something being cancelled, while Cabinet members engage in a beauty contest in order to try and replace the leader after the next general election. I mean, it's completely chaotic, isn't it? I mean, if you were in charge, would you ever have let this happen?
Well, look, Ed, first of all, you have also been a politician and, in fact, on the other side of the fence. I'm not surprised to hear you characterising it in that way. What I would say is actually this is a party that's prepared to think about the things that for others, and I suggest some on your former side, on the Labour side, would say, well, just plough ahead with it. Just carry. It doesn't matter the world has fundamentally changed. It doesn't matter people aren't travelling anymore. It doesn't matter that these difficult decisions are exactly that, difficult. We'll do them anyway, and will spend money in not the best way for communities around the country. I think the fact that Rishi is prepared to tackle that and take it on is actually very fundamental to the difference that I think you'll hear him describe today. He'll say he is a person who's prepared to take long-term decisions, not always popular in the short term, for a brighter future. And I think he'll contrast that with Keir Starmer, who he'll say, I think, is only ever looking to do the popular thing in the moment, flip-flopping around all over the place. And that will be the contrast he'll set out today.
Talking about doing popular things in the moment, what did you make of Suella Braverman's speech yesterday? I think we have some moments from it. A lot of people were quite shocked when she talked about the fact that we're facing a migration hurricane. Let's have a listen. Do you think we're facing a hurricane of immigration? Would you have been able to make a speech like that? And if you'd heard it, for instance, from Nigel Farage, would you have been comfortable?
Well, for a start, many of us in this country are, in one way or the other, immigrants to it. I'm a third generation. Suella's a first generation immigrants, her parents having moved here in the 60s. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look after our borders, and the Conservative Party fundamentally believes that we should. It doesn't mean that we're not an open and generous country. I had 3 Ukrainians live in my house for a year. 100,000 other families did the same thing. We're very generous. But we don't think it's right that people should be, for example, trafficked across by illegal immigration, by gangs across the Channel, and we should just say that's okay. In my role as Defence Secretary, I spend my time now making sure that we are helping in those regions of the world which otherwise could get out of control. This weekend, I sent a battalion to Kosovo, where there are tensions on the Kosovo-Serbia border under NATO, to make sure that we get to these situations before they become
I don't think anybody wants people to be trafficked. And you would say that you have had some success in cracking down on those gangs, I'm sure. But we're talking, in that case, about 45,000 migrants, and you're making an effort to stop those people getting into those boats. Do you honestly think we face millions, a hurricane of immigration? Because our legal immigration numbers are net 600,000. It is it not, inflammatory to use the words hurricane and millions when those figures are not borne out by facts?
Well, first of all, you say everybody wants to stop that illegal migration. We're the only ones who've been actually voting to stop it, and, as you pointed out, with some success, with numbers down for the first time ever on those illegal channel crossings by 20% this year. Well, the other lot have been voting against some frustrating progress to stop that, so that's the point I'm making there. But actually, the wider point I think that the Home Secretary is quite rightly making is, in a world with billions of people, of course, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people could end up being uprooted if we don't get to these problems elsewhere in the world and help to resolve them before people start to move. This country's got a big, open, warm, generous spirit to it, but we must have, and do have now, thanks to this Conservative government, a points-based system which says you can only come here if you are within the category, for example, speak English, the jobs and skills that we need, you can support yourself and your family. So in other words, we get to pick and choose. What we won't support is the illegal system. That's part of it, and then my part of it, the international part, is making sure that we resolve some of those bigger problems in the world.
Just a very quick final question. Andrew Boff was ejected from the Conservative conference yesterday for disagreeing with Suella Braverman's speech. I think she's now said she regretted him being thrown out. The same thing happened at the Labour conference in 2005 when Wolfgang was thrown out for protesting the Iraq war. The next day, the Defence Secretary John Reid stood up at the conference and issued an apology. I just wondered whether, as Defence Secretary, you're going to do the same thing today at the conference?
I'm not actually speaking at the conference stage today. That was on Sunday. I didn't see the incident, actually. I've only heard about it this morning, actually, whilst doing the media round. So it'd be a bit disingenuous for me to comment. Some people said it was disturbing.
Suella Braverman's speech?
Other people were saying...
Didn't you watch her speech?
I'm afraid I didn't. I was actually dealing with some security issues.
Well, maybe you need to apologise to her rather than to Mr.
security
Boff.
issues at the time. I think people would like me to be getting on with the job, which often deals with our national security and our defence, which is what I was doing at that moment in time.
Very good answer. Thank you, Mr. Shapps.